Hello everyone, in this video we're doing a first-person setup when using generic models and animations. We'll focus on basic locomotion and using the Melee module. Before we start, I'd like to thank all of my Patreon supporters for the amazing support. This scene will be made available on Patreon. So before we start, I want to be really specific about a couple of things. This is only useful if you are using generic rigs and animations for first person. If you are not, then this won't be useful to you, simply because there's just no difference in first person or third person if you are just using humanoid rigs and animations, because it will just be exactly the same, just a different camera angle pretty much. Movement sure might be slightly different, but other than that there's not much of a difference. Now, why would you use generic rigs and animations? Well, if you are using this type of FPS like I am, for example. Yes, technically you could set the rig to humanoid, but then the animations won't work anymore anyway, so pretty useless. So that's why I'm covering this. I know several people are going to be using something like this. There's also quite a big lack of humanoid first-person animations, because animations in first person really should be different. You see that in any first person game you're playing. The animations are just totally different than your usual third person animations. So yeah, that's why I'm covering this. So a couple of things. I managed to get Melee working. A couple of small downsides to it. Basically we'll have to set it up pretty much exactly like I did with hand-to-hand combat with the Melee module, so there's a couple of small tweaks, but yeah, overall it is working, so let's get started. So just as usual, we have our empty scene here, we have our plane, and that's pretty much it. Going to be dragging in the default player here, going to drag in a camera motor as well. Now, because I deleted the existing camera motor I had from this scene, I'm going to manually drag it in. It won't recognize it anymore otherwise. And we'll start with these changes. Now, there's a couple of small tweaks I'm going to do, but first, for any of that to make any sense whatsoever, we need to have a different model. Now, I'll add in the description what I'm using. Obviously, you don't have to use that. You can use whatever you want. But yeah, basically this one is full with prefabs, and you have, arms for different types of weapons. Animations are all in there, axes, crossbows. So I was pretty impressed. Flashlights, grenades, there's so much stuff in here. And it's all really awesome, and it looks good, animations are fine, etc, etc. Just one problem, it's all generic, and that makes it slightly more difficult to set this up properly. So what I did, and I'll show you this, so here we have the hands without weapon. So I dragged it into the scene, unpacked the prefab, I removed the animator and added it again. Yes, you could just empty them, but this is slightly faster. And next up, I made sure to set the look to the look I wanted. So I used 6 and I think it's 5 for the hands. But yeah, you can choose whatever look you want. So this is just for the look. Then next up, create an empty folder where you can drag this prefab in. So just drag it in. And then you'll get, this result basically. So an empty animator, and yeah, that's it. So on the player, what we're going to do is we're going to be dragging this in. Now this will work, despite being generic, it will, work just fine. That's not really a problem. You'll see a couple of the issues a bit later on. So next up, we need to make a couple of changes. So basically, we're going to do camera direction. Just like usual, I'll turn off can run. I want that to be a separate button. And yeah, that's pretty much The only other change I'm making is changing angular speed. That just looks really off if you are using first person. It's just way too fast. Turn off acceleration as well. Doesn't really look nice in first person. Cool. So a couple of small changes. I upped the run speed a bit. 4 is not really running, it's just walking really fast. So yeah, a couple of changes, not all that much as you can see. Now what we're going to do next is we are going to be creating a new state, and I'm not going to redo that all over again because it's just drag and drop and just don't really see the point. So we have empty idle here. So basically what you do is right click, create game creator, characters, and locomotion state. Just rename it to whatever you want. I'm going to delete this, and then drag in the animations you want to use. Now as you can see, a lot of this is exactly the same. If you have more animations for first person, great, just drag them in. So I'm getting these all from Hands Without Weapon, and I literally just dragged in those animations. Now by default, these were not set to loop, which is a bit strange for idle animations, but yeah. So the idle, walking and running, set them to loop, and that's it. So drag all of those in, and there we have our state. So this is the result. I also did an entry clip, get, which is basically him lifting his arms just a bit. You don't have to, you can do whatever you want, but that's what I was using. So I'm going to drag that in. Where is it? And that will be the default state. So next up, camera motor. We need to make a couple of changes here as well, of course. So first off, we need to make sure it's set to first person, quite important. And I changed the position offset to these values, and you don't have to. 2 meters high, just like the default character controller is a bit too much. It doesn't really match models quite often. It's just a bit too much. And we have mouse move. I changed the pitch to 60. I think 120 is too much. Again, you don't really have to. And we have the head bobbing feature that Game Creator uses. I set that to 0.5. Again, up to you. And I used stiff spine animation here. So let me explain first why we're doing all of this. So the pitch basically is how far you can drag the mouse around. The default value is just way too high. You'll completely get off target. As for the height, again, that's just to match the models. If you have a different model, you might have to set this to, I don't know, 1.8. Instead, 2 meters will always be too high. It's basically on top of the player. It's just not going to match any model really. And I advanced it a bit. I'm not really sure why I did that, so let's just try it without. No. Oh yeah, I did that basically to hide the cut here on the arms. That's why. Next up, on the camera, I already set this, but by default this will be set to 0.3, I think, and basically it will clip a lot of the model and it will look awful. So what you need to do is just set this to the smallest possible value, which is 0.01. If you set 0, you'll just get this, and this is what we'll get. So as you can see, it's animating just fine. We didn't set running yet. I should still have to do that. This is the rotation, and you can change this if you want. You don't have to do this. You can set different values for the camera motor if you think we see too much of the arms or something like that. But this is how the movement will go. And yes, these are definitely not the most exciting walking animations there are, but it works. So next up, what we're going to do is on the player can run is disabled. So we want to make sure he can run. So let's create a new empty. Let's call it movement. Add a trigger. key hold. Where's key hold? I'm going to use left shift because, you know, that's what's often used. It just makes sense. And we're going to do on timeout. So after a timeout of 0.5, we are going to turn on can run again. Now we need to add an additional trigger for if we let go of left shift. So on key up, left shift. Where is left shift? There we go. And yeah, basically, you know, once we let go of left shift, we need to make sure can run is disabled again. So property player can run is on when we hold it, and when we let go, it's off. And that's it. You know, now we can run with a different button, or at least a separate button. It won't auto run. So that's it for these basics. By the way, I'm not sure if I even explained why we're using camera direction. Using movement direction won't work for first person. Basically, you'll if you press D for long enough, you'll just rotate around the arms. Just doesn't work. So really plain and simple. Now next up, what we're going to do is we're going to create combat, and this will, I'll be using the melee module. Like, obviously you don't have to, I just wanted to show that you can still use the melee module in first person even if you don't have humanoid animations. There are a couple of small limitations, of course, because game creators created around humanoid animations, humanoid rigs, not generic. So just like with animals, etc., it will work. You just have to work around a couple of those limitations. And just to be clear, those limitations are actually related to the rig. It's simply because generic rigs don't have set hand locations, hip locations, all of those things. It just doesn't work like that with generic. That's why humanoid exists. But as you can see, we don't actually even have a full body, so obviously we couldn't even properly map a humanoid rig to this. But even if we could, we'd still lose the animation, so there's no win anyway. So what we're going to do is we're going to only set 2 triggers here. So trigger 1 and trigger 2. The first trigger will be, well, you can pick whatever button you want. I'm going to use what is it? Key down. I'm going to use alpha 1. So basically, pressing the 1 button will draw the first weapon. In this case, that's our knife. Then we're going to set conditions because I do want the same button to also holster it. That's personal preference. And we're going to do another button. So let's do mouse down, right, and that's going to be the actual melee attack. Cool. So yeah, pretty basic so far, so not all that exciting. So first up, we need to set some conditions. So if we're unarmed, where is it? Melee. Always the unarmed or armed, always select the folder unless you really know from the top of your head that it's this naming is slightly different. I think there's just a space in the action of difference. They'll look the same, and if you accidentally use the shooter one, it just won't work. So if we're unarmed, then we're going to draw the weapon. And we don't have a weapon yet, we'll set that up, but let's already set up those actions. So draw weapon, so player, and sheath weapon. Unfortunately, because we can't actually put the knife in the hand of the player, because again, this is generic, we're going to use some trickery. It works with this, with this pack anyway, it works really well, but it's something to keep in mind. So we're going to add an additional step, and that's model, and set this to player. Now I want to explain why we're doing this. So Because we can't actually map the knife in the hand of the player, just won't work, we're going to create an invisible melee module weapon. So it will be there, but the model will be invisible. And we're basically going to switch arms to arms that have a knife. And that will work perfect with all of the animations, etc. But just like with the video I did for melee combat in third person, we'll actually have to set the collider to the actual knife model. So slight workaround, but it works. So let's head over to hands knife. Oh, no, I need to pick a prefab, don't I? Yeah. Prefab, and where is it? Hands knife. So just drag it into the scene. This is what it looks like. Obviously, you should set the model to be the unpack to be the same when it comes to the material. So otherwise, it will just look weird. I mean, you don't have to, but yeah, it's kind of strange. Otherwise, so it's I think 6 and 5. And then as you can see, it looks the same. So, it's the same design, just slightly different model. And the important part here again is you can also do this. Basically, you don't have to do what I did. Oops. And there we go. So that's important. Now drag it into the same prefab folder. I already have it, but yeah, just drag it in and that's it. And then we have this this new model that we're going to change to. So where are those actions? There we go. So hands, knife, hands, knife. Now open up that prefab we just created, and basically what you need to do is on the knife, which I can't remember which one it is, this one, add a sphere collider, is trigger, and basically tag it to melee, and there we go. So now this the actual knife will have a trigger collider. You can resize it better than I did. It doesn't have to look like this. And now the actual model will have will have a sphere collider that will input damage. So that's the goal. Cool. So now that that's done, what we're going to do is we're going to set up some new melee clips first. So I'll create new ones just to show how it works. I'll just call these attack 1, but I'd recommend calling them something better, especially if you're going to have more weapons. Melee clip, there we go. Attack 02. And all you really need to do here is, well, drag in animations. That's pretty much all there is to it. You don't need to worry about anything else because we're not using it. Unfortunately, we can't. So attack 01, and we just have to find those animations. So models, knife, animation, and there's 2 attacks, attack 1 and 2, and I'm going to use 1 in 1. Makes sense. And into I'm going to use unlock this one, and into I'm going to select the second one. So I'm going to lock this again just to be sure, and we'll use attack 2. And there we go. That's it. Now let's create a new melee weapon that can actually use those clips. So game creator, melee, and melee weapon. So knife, I'll just call this knife FPS. There we go. So let's unlock this one. And yeah, knife FPS. This is a knife. This will be important, but basically we'll need to set this to root again, because nothing else will be recognized because this is not a humanoid rig. And we're going to add, I'm going to add 2 combos here. So what is it? Attack 1. No, attack 2 first. I'll explain why. And attack 1. We'll add a little plus, so that will mean we can trigger it with the A combo, and this will be input forwards. Now the reason I'm doing it in this order is because this will simply supersede this. So considering this is an additional input, it needs to be higher, because otherwise this will always supersede whatever this is. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Now it does need a weapon, and like I said, we don't have one. I'm going to lock this. I'll just keep it open. So prefabs. Let's do a cube. No, let's do a sphere this time, just to have a different name. 3D objects, sphere. We'll edit it in a bit. We'll drag it in here. Now it's a prefab, and that's it. Now let's unlock this one. And this sphere will not have a mesh renderer. It will be a lot smaller. There we go. All set to 0. And does it need to be a trigger? I don't think it needs to be a trigger. Then make sure you overwrite those transforms we did for the prefab. And that's it. So now it will draw that sphere, which is basically nothing. Nothing at all. But that's what's needed in order to make sure we can still use the combo function for melee. So let's head over back to combat. So we're gonna draw our knife FPS here. Sheeting, we don't have to select what we're sheeting, it just sheets the melee weapon. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So let's give this a go. I'm pretty sure I still forgot something. Oh yeah, I forgot the states. So we'll still have to set those up. So yeah, without states it's not really going to do anything. Cool, let's do that first. I was already thinking this was a bit too fast and easy. Yeah, so basically our knife needs a state. So again, I'm not just going to re-drag in all of those animations, but basically you create another, create locomotion state. Where is it? Game creator, locomotion state, create a new one, and just drag in all of the animations that are related to the knife one. So let me lock this. So basically hands, knife, animations, and then you have your idle, you have your walking, running, all of that. Again, I'm using the get as well, just to make sure we we're kind of drawing it. It's not a full draw, but I'm guessing it's just a melee type of animation. So yeah, we need those as well. Again, it's just drag and drop, that's all there is to it. And in our knife FPS, well, hard to pronounce, we need to drag that in as a character state, because that's what's being used. Quite important, because otherwise we don't have a state. Before we do that, we need to make sure we have everything set up. So the player obviously still needs the melee component, so character melee, and we didn't even set up any of the animations, the attacks yet. So if the player is armed, so if melee character is armed, then we are going to do combo A, and that's it. So let's double check. We're changing the model to the knife one. We're changing back to the default one if we're shooting, and yeah, that's pretty much it. So let's try this out. So if I press 1, we'll draw our knife. As you can see, if we're holding the right trigger, we're doing this animation, and if we're walking, we'll do the stab in front. And I mean, yeah, that's literally all there is to it. Yeah, you can have some exit animations as well to make it look a tiny bit smoother, for example. That's completely up to you. But yeah, that's all you really need to do to make the melee module work with generic rigs and animations in first person. Yeah, definitely play around a bit with those running animations, but yeah, that's pretty much it. So if you want this to do some damage, we'll need to make one change, and I apologize for that. So we need to go to hands, knife, and on the actual mesh, we need to remove that sphere collider we created. We can set this to untagged as well. And we need to go to the actual bone. And this is where we add our sphere collider, set this to melee. And, well, maybe not a sphere collider. Let's do a, let's try, I don't know, box collider maybe. No, sphere. I think a capsule collider would be best. There we go. And it's the wrong way, that's kind of weird. Let's do, I don't know. Yeah, perfect. There we go. Let's adjust this a bit. Make this thinner. That's about right. Perfect. Oh, that's a lot better. And this needs to have the melee tag. Set it to trigger. There we go. And this is the actual bone that's moving. For some reason the mesh doesn't move. I'm not going to pretend I know why. It's just the case. Then next up, let's add a cube here. Just to show you that we're actually doing some damage. So the cube doesn't need to be a trigger. We're going to add a trigger here. This is going to be tag enter melee. Let's give him some stats as well. Create those actions. Attribute. Game objects. Cube. Health. Now if for some reason you don't have a subtract, just do add and use a minus value. I don't know why you don't have subtract, but I know a lot of people don't. And let's try this out. I'm going to drag the scene here so you can see. So if I draw the knife and select the bone, need to make sure it stays selected, and then do the melee, you'll see it maps just fine. Cool. Then next up, well, we can drag this back. Next up, I'm going to select our cube here, and we're going to monitor his health. Yeah, this is why I'm not a big fan of using the mouse movement for movement. But yeah, basically we're subtracting health, and yeah. Well, you can do a better job at it, but at least that's how it works. So that's it for this video. Hope you enjoyed this. If you did, please hit like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.